What's going on, people? Good late afternoon, or, well, by the time I get this video up, it'll probably be early evening, but welcome. Hope you guys are still doing well on this Wednesday. Real quick, before I get into the main portion of this video, the Seahawks did have a practice today at the VMAC. They did get on the field and do stuff, but it was a walkthrough. So there's really not going to be a lot I can talk about from that. A walkthrough is... there's very little we're going to be able to get out of that. The players probably benefit from it, I'm sure. But in terms of us viewing it or digesting it in any way, it's tough. You're just not going to see as much. I saw a couple clips of Darnold completing passes to JSN. I saw a couple other clips as well, but there wasn't a lot of concrete, actionable, discussionable points. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. And at this point, I would just say, don't expect to hear too much about today's session, but next time they get on the field for a contact day or any day that's more involved than a walkthrough, we will be picking that back up. So since we're not going to be able to talk about that today, I want to talk a little bit more about the big news from earlier. And I mean, big maybe doesn't even really capture it. This is a massive, massive decision that the Seahawks have made. And I made one video about it already, obviously, but I don't know if one video is going to really cut it for something like this, right? Like, if this team trades a starter, I'd probably make more than one video about it over the course of at least a day, maybe 2 days. So when they decide to give their general manager a 4-year contract extension that keeps him through either 2030 or 2031, I've heard both, that probably merits a little bit of a deeper discussion than just my initial thoughts. So let's get back into the John Schneider thing. For those of you who didn't see somehow, although I'm sure everybody's seen it by now, John Schneider got a 4-year contract extension earlier today, and Seahawks fans certainly have an arrangement of thoughts. Real quick, though, please click the thumbs up button on this video. Subscribe if you're new. Click the bell for notifications. Become a channel member for $2 a month. Those are the best ways to support the channel. And to follow up on some of the things that were said in the earlier video, and to a certain extent some of the comments that I got, I think that the real crux of any argument that you can make is it's really hard to define the parameters here, because it is very hard to separate the John Schneider from the Pete Carroll. And that is why I think this discussion with John Schneider is so hard, where some people think he's very good and other people feel otherwise. Now, I believe that Pete Carroll was making most of the decisions from 2010 through the 2021 season. That is what I believe. I don't have any proof of it. I don't think anybody has any proof to the contrary necessarily, or at least nothing that actually is concrete and irrefutable. So that is what I believe. I think that John Schneider did some stuff during that period of time. He did. But I think that it wasn't until 2022 when John Schneider really got full GM powers, or at least became the primary decision maker for roster stuff in Seattle. That's just my gut, though. I admit we don't know, and I don't think we will ever know. I don't think there's anything that can really happen that can prove it one way or the other. That's just my read on the situation based on the way things went during these periods of time. So for me personally, I don't blame John Schneider for Malik McDowell, LJ Collier, Jermaine Ifedi, D. Eskridge. I don't blame him for those. Kristen Michael to a certain extent. Aaron Curry. Well, no, Aaron Curry was the previous regime anyway, now that I think about it. So I want to be clear about that. I don't blame him for that. I am absolving him of blame for that. I don't blame him for Jamal Adams. I think that Pete at least had a heavy hand on the steering wheel for those things, if not the one in the driver's seat. So, okay, I don't think that was him, but that also means that I don't think that Earl Thomas Russell Okung, Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, Doug Baldwin, etc. All those good players, all those really awesome players that we brought in the early 2010s, I don't think that was John Schneider either. I think that was some Pete Carroll, because Pete Carroll had a lot of familiarity with college football at that time because he had just been coaching in it, and also part Scott McLaughlin, who was the part of the front office during that time. And after he left, the drafts immediately became very, very rough in Seattle. I think both of those guys had more to do with Seattle's success drafting during that, what was it, like a 3-year, I think, yeah, it was a 3-year period, than John Schneider. You can't have it both ways. If you're going to say that John Schneider's not to blame for the bad picks from 2014 to 2021, hard to give him credit for the picks that were good before then. So that's where I'm coming from. So therefore, I'm looking at the last few years, basically since the 2022 draft, and since then the drafts have changed dramatically, which is part of the reason why I think that that's when something changed. I think that you look back at 2022, where we drafted Charles Cross, we drafted Abe Lucas. I don't think those are picks that Pete Carroll would have made if he were the one in control. Those were more finesse, pass-blocking offensive tackles. That's not typically the kind of player Pete Carroll drafts. Pete Carroll likes the more physical, run-blocking, rough-and-tumble guys. He might have drafted Trevor Penning instead of Charles Cross, just off the top of my head. Again, I'm speculating, but that's all we can do, right? If they're not going to be a complete open book about this stuff, then we don't ever really get to know. That is kind of where I'm operating from. And on that front, John Schneider has had good drafts. Sure, John Schneider has definitely done some good work drafting. It's free agency, maybe not so much, right? Free agency has been mostly bad. It's been highlighted by signings such as Draymond Jones, which was obviously didn't work out at all. Last year, pretty much every free agent decision we made was the wrong one. Bringing in guys like Rayshon Jenkins, bringing back guys like Noah Fant, making decisions like what was his name? Got him. Jerome Baker, Tyrell Dodson. Really nothing we did last offseason in free agency worked. You go back before then, you've got things like re-signing Quandre Diggs. I don't think we really got our money's worth out of that one. There is some really bad stuff there. I don't think it offsets the draft, but I do think that it does expose a weakness in the way John conducts his business. And overall, here's what I'm going to say about this, because from that video I made earlier today, it seemed like a pretty significant majority of Seahawks fans think that John Schneider is great and they support the extension. Here's what I'm going to say about that. To anybody out there watching this video who really likes this extension and thinks this is the right move, are you going to feel that way if in 6 months the Seahawks have had a bad season, like say 6 or fewer wins? And are you going to feel the same way if, okay, same question, but instead they have another 9-win season where they either miss the playoffs by 1 game or make the playoffs by 1 game and don't go anywhere? Would you still do this 4-year extension in 6 months knowing that's the result? That is why I said I think we could have stood to wait a little bit on this one. We just had a pretty tumultuous offseason. We had a big offseason. We did some big things that there are other teams out there that they would not have done. Most other teams don't move off their franchise quarterback. Most other teams don't trade a player theoretically going into his prime who has already been highly productive in his career like a DK Metcalf. Most other teams don't swap out their franchise quarterback, well, I don't know if Sam Darnold's a franchise quarterback, but he's certainly your starting quarterback. Most other teams probably wouldn't do stuff like that, and he did those things. And that's bold. I mean, it is bold. And I'm not saying it's wrong. We don't know if it's right or wrong yet. The thing that bothers me is that with the recent results, like let's say John Schneider, let's say you don't give him anything from before 2022. So you're looking at 9 wins, 9 wins, 10 wins. If this season doesn't go according to plan and we end up with either another 9-win season or somewhere around there, or God forbid a bad season, with this easy schedule, I got to ask the people out there who like this decision, would you still like the decision if that is what happens over the next few months? Now, maybe some of you would say, yes, I still think he's a good GM even if this season goes bad, but I'm having a hard time figuring that one out when this team has been kind of stuck in the middle for a few years now. And some people have argued that, hey, he's trying to get out of being stuck in the middle. That's why he made all these moves. But what if it doesn't get us unstuck? What if we're still in the middle at the end of the year? What if we've gone the wrong way? Because it's not like we completely just rebooted everything around young players. Yes, we do have some great young talent on this team, as I talked about earlier today. We have some of the best young talent in the league, but we also have a lot of aging veterans that we brought in this offseason. Sam Darnold, not aging yet, but he is middle-aged for an NFL player. We have guys like DeMarcus Lawrence, Cooper Kupp. We brought these guys in on 3-year deals. These are older players past their prime. You're doing that because you're trying to win right now. This is not a situation where we can go 6-11 and it's cool because the guys are getting experience for a Super Bowl run or a deep playoff run next year. There are guys on this team that we're hoping have one more good season in them. There are people we brought in here for this year and maybe next year. D-Law, Cooper Kupp, even a guy like Ernest Jones, who is not old. Even a guy like Ernest Jones, with his potential health issues, you're bringing him more for the short term than you are the long term. I'm not thinking Ernest Jones is going to be here playing at a high level in 7 or 8 years. Maybe not even 5 or 6 years. He's here for the next several years, and he's great, but we need to win now. If the Kansas City Chiefs or the Philadelphia Eagles or the Baltimore Ravens have a bad season this year, or even a really bad season, I don't think fans of those teams, I don't think any of them, except the unstable ones, would want their GMs to get canned. Maybe Eagles fans, because that's how they do things. Like, maybe the Eagles fans would be like, irrational about it. But for the most part, I imagine that those GMs are immune. They could have a 2-15 season, and I think they bought enough goodwill because they've been so good lately. The Ravens making things happen in the playoffs every year. I know they haven't had the deep run yet, but they're involved consistently. They're winning playoff games fairly consistently at this point. Chiefs, obviously, 3 straight Super Bowl appearances. The Eagles, Super Bowl champions. Like, those are GMs that you extend without thinking about, because even a bad season, maybe even 2 bad seasons, you're fine. They've done too much. They bought themselves goodwill. I don't know if John Schneider has bought himself goodwill, because we don't know if these things are going to work out. Now, we don't know if they won't. Like, that's the thing. That I'm separating myself from that part of it. You guys know I didn't like our offseason very much. It was not the offseason that I would have done. It's not the offseason that I think is going to produce the best results. But we don't know yet. We don't know if the offseason that we had is going to work. And I think that's a great argument for not firing him, which is why I have said I don't want to fire John Schneider. Even after the offseason we just had, I still don't want to fire John Schneider, because he deserves to see if his offseason works. If we go out there and have some 12-win season and put together a playoff win or two, then the offseason worked. But you didn't have to do this right now. I'm going to say it again. In 2020, the Seahawks extended Pete Carroll and John Schneider after, I want to say, 6 games. So you can wait for midseason to do this stuff, and we decided not to do it. That is kind of the thing that bothers me, because to me, even if you are still a John Schneider fan, your belief in him as a GM should not be bulletproof right now. I mean, obviously mine isn't, but even if you like him, how can it be bulletproof with the recent results? Again, forget about the stuff from before 2020. Forget about the stuff from before 2021. Honestly, you could even say, hey, forget about everything before Pete Carroll got fired. You could just say that, hey, John Schneider is in the middle of basically his 2nd year as GM. This is year 2 of John Schneider. Forget about everything before then. Again, that's a great argument to not fire him. I don't know if it's a great argument to extend him when we don't know how his big splash offseason is going to pan out yet. That's really all I'm saying here. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. Peace Walker tonight on Twitch. Come watch.